In the last few years, as we know, higher education policy has been increasingly explicit about the need for universities to reinvent themselves as a public good for the 21st century and to make a real commitment to public engagement, to dialogue and knowledge exchange rather than transfer, and to listen to and learn from the different communities with which they engage. And all universities, as we know, I think now are grappling with the challenges associated with being an engaged university. In this talk, I'll offer a series of personal reflections on knowledge exchange in a city with the youngest demographic profile of any European city and one of the most culturally diverse. We'll also offer an overview of an institutional journey as well, where culture has been a vehicle for greater public engagement. This last weekend, I was entering data relating to current research projects on the Research Council's Research Fish site. And as you're aware, one of the tabs on that Research Fish site is public engagement. And as I was filling the many drop-down forms, I was reminded of one of the final essays of the Palestinian intellectual Edward Said, in which he promoted the idea of communities of interpretation as a rejoinder to, I quote, the terrible reductive conflicts that herd people under falsely unifying rubrics like the West or Islam, and invent collective identities for a large number of individuals who are actually very diverse. For Said, these communities of interpretation would investigate, analyse, apprehend, criticise, and judge in a mission of understanding. I think what Said wrote there captures both what a research university is about, investigating, analysing, apprehending, criticising and judging, and what public engagement with research should aim to achieve, the development through engagement of communities of understanding. By training, I'm an historian, and sharing my knowledge about the past has been central to my career. First as a school teacher, I taught for 15 years in the Midlands, then as a member of an anti-racist curriculum unit in this city, and then as a teacher trainer, and finally now as an urban historian based at the University of Birmingham. My first experience of public engagement with research came as a consequence of a series of meetings in this city in the late 1990s, which led to the formation of a very ad hoc group of people called Black Past's Birmingham Futures. The meetings of this group were hosted by Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, and they involved teachers, museum and heritage professionals, policymakers, and community activists. Now, Birmingham is recognised, I think, nationally as epitomising Perec's idea of a community of communities. And that group addressed the question, how can public institutions in this city reflect and represent the interests of a culturally diverse demographic? Our first action, after several meetings, was to put together a very small Heritage Lottery Fund bid to fund the publication of, well, that's the logo, by the way, for Black Past Birmingham Futures. To put together a publication of a book which captured current research about Birmingham's culturally diverse history and the key locally held museum and archive collections on which this research drew. A copy of the book was sent to every single school in the local education authority, and a mobile exhibition was also produced and travelled around community libraries and other institutions, including the Old Library of Birmingham and also the University of Birmingham itself. The community response to the book was a desire for far more information. So I was then involved in writing a second, much larger bid to the Heritage Lottery Fund for a partnership project with Birmingham City Archives, who are now based on the 4th floor of this building. And that project was called Connecting Histories. This had a budget of 1 million and implied a team of 4 archivists, 2 positive action trainees, 2 community engagement workers, a digitation officer, a project manager, and 2 academics, one from the University of Birmingham, myself, and one from the University of Warwick, working together for 18 months. The project catalogued a range of major archives, established a website, and designed online learning packages based on research. Its 2 most significant outcomes, I believe, were first, the evolution of a new and innovative approach to community engagement within the archive service of this library. One which shifted a model based on practitioner-led practice to one which was responsive to community agendas and the co-production of knowledge. The impact of the project was such that the community engagement role was then embedded in core staffing of the library. A second, which was, even though the project actually emerged out of personal relationships, it triggered an incremental raft of strategic projects involving other academics and contribute to Birmingham's activities as a publicly engaged university. Building on the impact of Connecting Histories, in partnership with City Archives again, I made an application to the Arts Humanities Research Council for a project called Birmingham Stories, from Communities of Interpretation to Communities of Understanding. I stole Saeed's sentence there, under the Knowledge Transfer Fellowship Scheme. This project involved, it's not working. This project involved a series of 10 community-based workshops and 10 online research guides to Birmingham archive collections. These focused on hidden histories of Birmingham and were accompanied by a series of practitioner workshops which were concerned with issues of access and audience. The project used the existing website platform and involved 2 other academics, one of whom was an early career researcher. One of the unexpected engagement research output results of the project was the installation of a blue plaque commemorating the work of a black minister, the Reverend Peter Stanford. So the project did research, we put out lots of material online, and during that research we made connections with the Civic Society in Birmingham, and they wanted a blue plaque to go on a church that was on the site of the original church that Stanford was the first black minister for in the city. And the plaque was installed in that building. It's a new building now. It's now Manio Black Church. And a series of outreach events were organised with the congregation and a local school using the project's research. When the Birmingham Stories project came to an end in 2009, I had a very short space when I became a normal academic again, I think. And then I became Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for Cultural Engagement at the University of Birmingham. The university's strategic framework had public engagement as one of its 5 objectives, and I was tasked with developing the cultural strand of this framework. This involved drawing together a small team of enthusiastic staff with experience of working with different publics to their role as custodians of the university's various cultural assets. For example, our research and cultural collections, the Dantford Collection of West African Art, Winterbourne House and Botanic Garden, the Barber Institute of Fine Arts, the Lapworth Museum of Geology, the Cadbury Research Library, special collections, and of course the library itself. Now the cultural engagement strategy was structured around 5 areas, and within these areas there was a research dimension. For example, research on ourselves as an institution resulted in a campus blue plaque trail, which captured key people who had researched at the University of Birmingham and their work, including Elgar, obviously being the first professor of music at the University of Birmingham, and sadly didn't like being at Birmingham, but we didn't say that on the plaque. We're now working on putting an app so that you can actually now have talking heads talking about the various blue plaques that we've got. And this is a way we thought of opening up the campus for people coming onto campus in terms of getting a sense of who we are. Because one of the things I'm very conscious of, we are a research university, and students come to us because they know our reputation. But when they come, they don't really understand what a research university is, and neither do their parents in some ways. And so how do we kind of convey the nature of what it is to be a research university? We're now trying to link up with the Civic Society's own blue plaque trail so they can come from the city to the university and so forth. The research-based activities of an annual community day were expanded and now regularly bring in over 10,000 people onto campus to engage with the work of academic researchers amongst the rides and the face painting events. We also introduced an Arts and Science Festival as a way of celebrating our identity as a research university. A week of events, talks, demonstrations, led by staff and open to all. We're now in our third year, and the theme for March 2015, when it will take place, is Sight and Sound. Last year it was Death, which is a good theme, actually. An important part of the festival's success has been the involvement of a range of cultural partners, such as, for example, the Birmingham Opera Company. They put on a masterclass for students and the public on Mussorgsky's Songs of Death, alongside research presentations by the music department. We had a fascinating coming together of science and arts, where it was a discussion about the body in research, and we had computer scientists and art historians talking about the body together, or debating about the body together, I would say, rather. The university's participation in Black History Month had been intermittent up until I started the role as DPVC, and generally been dependent on whether students had an interest or not, whether student societies wanted to take it forward. We took the decision, and the we here is the university's Cultural Programming Committee, to put on a full programme of events, again open to all, and these were also included in the city's official programme. As a consequence, we attracted new people onto campus, people who didn't normally come out to Edgbaston. Last year, we had a well-attended debate on what is the future for Black History Month, which of course raised issues around why we had events in the programme which were not just about Afro-Caribbean diaspora. It was a case in point, I think, of an event addressing interpretations and understanding of research. Parallel to these activities, more academics became involved in public engagement activities. One young researcher completed his doctorate and then transformed his doctorate into an exhibition about Handsworth. We also established, parallel to the Cultural Programming Committee, a public engagement with research working group, which I co-chair with Alice Roberts, the university's Professor for Public Engagement with Science. This group consists of academic champions from each of our 5 colleges and representatives from professional services, and brought into direct conversation arts and science staff who wanted to do public engagement. One of the things I became very conscious of, and I'll make a big point of this at the end, is the importance of involving cultural partners in projects. It's become an important element in successful research bids, and more recently has been matched with learning from the sciences and involving community groups actually in the research process. And there are 2 recent examples of this at Birmingham. We have a very large project on cultural intermediation and the creative economy. It's an interdisciplinary project investigating how connections are made between producers and consumers of culture, and focuses on Birmingham and Manchester, and has involved researching with community groups in both cities. In this city, we targeted the area of Balsall Heath to understand how people connected with the cultural ecology of the city. The second is a research project under the Translating Cultures core, and again working with communities and cultural partners. It aims to develop new understandings of multilingual interaction in cities in the UK and communicate these to policymakers. 2 of the partners in that project, one is here, the Library of Birmingham, and the second one is just across the way, the Museum and Art Gallery. Separate to this, I've continued to look at different ways of actually sharing my own research. In the feedback we received about the Birmingham Stories project, the research guide on urban childhoods was singled out by many people who participated on the website and sent us evaluations and so forth of our events. And the idea then came to expand that into a full-scale exhibition as part of the Cultural Olympiad in 2012, and it focused on the history of childhood from the 18th century. The project again involved the collections of the City Archives and the museum. The exhibition in the museum, Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, presented the diversity of the city in all its forms and included a section on childhood in the 21st century, which is curated by young people. They chose as their part my room with a sign, "Do not come in there." And they basically constructed what you might say would be a multicultural bedroom, which is very interesting. Since then, I've also become, as I said in the introduction, I'm one of the 5 principal investigators across the UK for the engagement centres to do with the First World War. These are funded by the AHRC in partnership with the Heritage Lottery Fund. And central to their activity is to co-design and co-produce research with communities. And this is a very different agenda, especially when the funders desired that we engage with new community groups and rather than the usual suspects. Because as you're aware, meeting and working with new relationships takes a long time. It doesn't just happen overnight. And so the whole idea of the engagement centre has been turned so far on issues about outreach. And we've tried throughout our outreach activities to give different perspectives on the war and its multiple legacies. Because one of the issues we're facing, as are the other centres, is there is a focus for many people, rightly so, on the 20% who died, but not the 80% who actually returned from the First World War. And of those, many of those had disabilities. Many of those actually were deaf because of the sheer volume of noise on the Western Front and elsewhere. And also, people are focusing on the immediate impact of the First World War rather than the legacy. And one of the things I've been trying to get people to think about to do with legacy is about children. And it is about the fact that many children in the 1920s had a single parent, because their father died in the conflict. Their mother also had actually been working in munitions, and therefore the relationships were problematic. And we start to see the emergence of psychological problems. In the 1930s, we get child guidance opinion for the first time. There is a link, and that's a legacy of the First World War, as is the Second World War, and of course, as is the conflict in the Middle East now. So trying to get communities to understand those dimensions is what the centres are about. And of course, it's research universities that have that knowledge to do so. So future events in our outreach are, we're launching Stephen Bourne's Black Poppies, which is a book about the role of black servicemen, and the study day in about 2 weeks' time on disability and trauma, which will link together the experiences of the First World War with the ongoing issues around war and trauma. And the university, of course, University Hospital is a centre for trauma research. The centre is strategically based in this building. I chose not to link it to the university on campus because we get coming through here 11,000 people on a Saturday, 10,000 people on a Sunday. This is where we have to be if we want to reach out, I believe, to communities who are not ones we would normally work with. And the centre is also the hub of over 40 cultural organisations from across the region and beyond. One or two slides about the centre. So this is our website, which is really good. I'm a bit biased, of course. These are some of our activities. You can see this was a creative writing workshop. There's an exhibition currently in the library you may have seen on the First World War. That was one of our outputs of the project, and then people came in and responded to it. But also what we did recently, because Birmingham hosted the British Science Festival, we opened a pop-up Think Corner in one of the city's shopping centres. And the aim here was to take research out of the university to where communities actually gather. And shopping is a key place, we know. And so we had a whole series of activities going on, and there's a few of them. The volcano exploded. And I think what was interesting, we had 2,500 people come through the doors of that shopping centre in a 3-week period, which for the first time we'd done that, we were quite pleased with. So what of the future? Well, my term of office as Deputy Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Cultural Engagement is now over, although they did give me 1 day a week to do city liaison and cultural partnerships still. But my First World War Engagement Centre work still continues. And certain things have been put in place to continue, I think, the innovative ways we're engaging with the public. One of these is our Honorary Research Fellows scheme. We have a large number of cultural partners at the university, and we've now got 25 fellows have been identified by our different partners and have a 3-year fellowship. The fellows have access to the university's knowledge base, and we have, most importantly, access to the fellows' collective experience of being senior staff in public-facing organisations. They meet as a group. It's early days, but we've already had some really interesting discussions about the cultural ecology of the city. The second development is linked to our new library, which will open in 2016. And that's the concept of the STEAM room. The STEAM room is arts being put into STEM. And it's a physical space designed prominently within the new library. And the concept is very simple. We bring together researchers with curators and artists, and through conversation, produce new ways of presenting our research findings and reaching out to various publics, our students, their families, other academics, and the city at large, through programming events in this space. And this is already leading, I think, to new partnerships developing between the university and the Arts Council. The Arts Council are very taken with the idea of the STEAM room, and that's going to be very important for us in terms of getting funding. So in this short talk, I've tried to describe a journey, both personal and institutional, through public engagement with research. It is, of course, not journey's end. We still have a way to go in establishing the principle of public engagement as an integral to academic practice. So what have I learned along the way? At a recent Arts Council sponsored roundtable on the future of museum learning for children and young people, Estelle Morris noted the following: "The future," she said, "will be inherited by those who make wise partnerships." I think one thing that's self-evident about the journey I've described is the importance of working in partnership, internally, but also externally, with those organisations who understand as part of their core being issues around audience development. The experiences, networks and spaces of such organisations are valuable assets in helping universities achieve effective public engagement with research, in moving from communities of interpretation to communities of understanding. The movement from interpretation to understanding requires that we listen and are clear about exactly what we want to achieve, and like any project, we need to understand and document practice, to know what works and why, and what doesn't work and why. I just made a note here, I haven't said anything about impact, but that's another story. Thank you.